So, Emma, what are we talking about this episode?
We're talking about Montessori and Waldorf and those kinds of teachings.
This episode is called Creative Play. Welcome back, everyone, to our little corner of the internet. Welcome to the... I thought we'd be in a quiet library bus today.
Oh, a library bus. We used to have one of them. It was very exciting when it came.
If you don't know, this is Don't Wake the Baby, Unwind on sleepless nights to a wholesome mix of parenting, humour and crafting. If you're new here, you join me and Emma. We're a husband and wife. We always like to share something that's a bit different about each of us. You know, Emma's an identical quadruplet and I'm an only child and that sort of thing, just so you get to know us. Today, I thought I'd say I'm the one who is good with directions, generally speaking.
And I'm the one who I would say is abysmal with directions. Elliot's very annoying in that he can have gone somewhere once and then he knows how to get there again. And I will desperately need Google Maps up again to have any idea of where I've been and where I'm going.
I do worry about you driving. It could be to do with my dyslexia as well. They say that we tend to be quite good at like map reading and stuff, which is definitely a thing that I have. I like maps.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally I'm quite good at memorizing.
I'm not bad at map reading though. I don't know, mine's also a poor visual memory thing.
You have a very audible memory,
yes.
Whereas I can only really visualize things and remember them.
I was wondering, do you think this is why I like podcasts versus YouTube?
That's why you like podcasts and I like YouTube.
Yeah, I just wondered if that was a thing, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
It's only occurred to me now.
There you go.
Parenting achievement time!
It's parenting achievement time! What level of achievement have you unlocked this week? Or, well, whenever, really.
Whenever?
Yeah. What level parenting achievement have you unlocked, Emma?
I don't know what levels there are, but I would say outright lying to my child that there's horses out of the window to keep her entertained on a long journey is one I do often. Or that there's a big dog and there's nothing out of the window, but she's getting very fed up of waiting in the car. So I make up many interesting sights that I've seen, and then she's going looking out the window really excited.
Trying to find creative ways to reason with her, because she can now communicate and understand.
Yes.
It's no longer just, we can make her do something. You've got to find ways of convincing her that this is a good thing to do. And so that often resorts to either bribery or just outright lying to her that there's a horse out the window. Or
I was going to mention about my recent discovery last night. As toddlers do, she gets very moany if she wants something and you won't give it to her. But this is always about clothes because she's really set ideas. She's very fashionable. She has set ideas about what she wants to wear. So last night she was in bed and she was desperate to wear her wellies. And she was doing this thing where she's going, boots, 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 every like 5 seconds. I ended up resorting to pretending to opera sing no. I was going, no, no. And by the end of it, she found that hysterical. And she forgot all about the boots. I was sitting there going, can Elliot hear me pretending to sing opera of no?
Yeah, I could, definitely could. From downstairs, I was washing up and cleaning up, and I was going, what is going on up there?
Why is she singing no? But it was a good way of being like, no, I'm not going to do that.
It's preferable to the other mechanisms of like, we'll just give you ice cream or something.
Yeah.
Like...
I just found it funny at one point. I was like, I don't know if this is something I've cracked, and this is what from now on we're going to have to sing no out in public in a funny voice.
It's another parenting achievement that we've unlocked, though, is the toddler stage of wearing crazy things to bed.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to know if we're alone in this or if Lily's particularly weird in the types of things she likes to go to bed in.
If people have heard before, she's always been quite fashion orientated.
Yeah.
Wearing shower caps to nursery and such.
But yeah, she often like wears backpacks to bed, or has toys on top of her head, wears hats, goggles, swimming costumes.
She tries to wear jewellery, but I worry too much she'll strangle herself in her sleep. So that's another fight we often have, is that she can't wear like an old work lanyard of Elliot's to bed.
There you are. Well, if you have a similar achievement that you've unlocked, a moment, do these moments sound familiar to you? Have you lied and bribed to your child? Have you had to navigate your toddler wearing strange things to bed? Let us know. Let us know your parenting stories, and we'll feature them on an episode. And if you want to hear some more, then stay tuned to the end of this thing that you're listening to, and we'll share some from our listeners.
Yep.
Close that stair gate with a bang and slide down the stairs into the conversation today. Which, a perfectly normal expression. We're chatting about Montessori and Waldorf and other bits and pieces.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, Emma, do you want to give us a history lesson?
Well, I thought we'd start by reading what people thought these things were.
Okay, then we could explain what they are. I feel like we should clarify that we're by no means experts on this. We're just normal parents.
And I'm going to clarify now, if I say something that is incorrect, you're welcome to correct me.
Yeah.
It's just what my understanding is of these things.
I feel like we should say something incorrect purposefully to see if people catch it, cause a bit of controversy.
I think I might do anyway. We'll find out.
So what did people think?
I'm just finding it on my phone.
So you asked some other fellow parents, some friends?
Two of our, I want to call them my nursery mum friends, because I don't actually have many nursery mum friends, but I have two. First one said they think of it as Montessori and Waldorf as sensory toys and things like you encouraging them to like clean up after themselves and like help do household tasks.
Okay.
The other one, she's originally French, said she associates it with the Netherlands.
Oh.
She thinks it's very big over there. So in her head, even though like Montessori is Italian, she sees it as a very Dutch kind of learning thing.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
You say that. I suppose I'd not considered where it had come from, but in my head, if I'd had to have made a guess about where in the world it might have originated from, I might have gone Dutch.
Well, I think, and I know from listening to another podcast that there is a lot of Montessori schools over there. So actually, I think she's probably right. But till she said that, I was like, I never put together that some countries might favour it a lot more than others. And I asked my sisters, all pretty similar, of wooden stuff.
Yeah, wooden stuff.
And a few of them knew like it's hands-on play, it's that kind of open learning. My quick history lesson, Maria Montessori was Italian and set up her thing in Rome. And Waldorf is by someone called Rudolf Steiner.
Okay. I'm learning lots. This is great. I'm just Googling it and seeing, I'm double checking and she's absolutely right.
I have to remember where he's from though. In my head, he might be Austrian.
That sounds right.
When we first had Lily, actually, was it slightly before? I think we talked about how I read avidly while I was pregnant, lots of things about parenting.
Trying to get prepared.
And at that time, I'd never heard of Waldorf. I really focused on Montessori. Yeah. Because that's something I had vaguely heard of.
Oh, before becoming a parent, I'd not heard of Montessori or Waldorf. Or other, I mean, the other thing is there are other
there's like
things as well.
Reggio Emilia.
Yeah.
There's loads of kind of almost very similar but slightly different emphasis is on learning styles.
Okay. We're focused predominantly on those two because I think, are they like the most well known?
I feel like they're the most popular.
Yeah.
It's my impression that they've kind of had almost a second wind. I think they were very popular a few years ago when they first were created. And then there kind of was a lull, and now they're slowly becoming more popular
So
again.
Did you say this? The Montessori lady, she opened her first school with this style of of education in 1907.
I didn't say what date. Very interesting. 1907.
So it's like you say, it's a long time ago, and then it's kind of really come back around recently. So let's dive into, do you want to explain what Montessori is?
So it's primarily, originally, they were learning styles.
Yeah.
They were mainly aimed at toddler and school-age children.
Yeah.
So this is when, like, new books come out, like the Montessori Baby. That wasn't ever considered before because it was originally seen as a way to help children learn in a very natural way.
Very much focused around education rather than...
Yeah, so with Montessori, I think her whole point was that she thinks children are naturally interested in things.
Yeah.
So why don't you just feed that curiosity rather than saying you have to learn this, you have to learn that. You give them the choice of, there's all these activities.
I feel like one of the best examples is taking a properly Montessori school where rather than teaching a curriculum where you'd sit at tables and learn something, they would have different activities dotted around.
And one of them might happen to focus on maths and one might happen to be English, but you get a free choice of what you're doing.
Your child will go and engage with them and learn through play as well.
Yeah, learn through is a big thing in them.
But it, as your friends and parent friends pointed out, there a lot of it is to do with wooden toys and play in that way. It's about saying the things you interact with don't need to be like electronic and flashing lights. And
they said the main thing about Waldorf and Montessori, they both use very natural materials. So it's wood or like natural as in it's wood or pure metal or something you find in nature, which we really did like. And I'm not going to lie and say our child doesn't have TV or, you know, some toys that make noises.
Yeah.
But I do think when I was learning about it, I thought, oh, what a great way to try and keep their imagination alive.
Yeah.
And try and make them more creative about things.
That's what really draws me to both of these things is around that encouraging creativity and their imagination. And that's really... I get the impression that's what both of these things are kind of aimed at doing.
I would say Waldorf is definitely more about imaginary play, whereas Montessori is more about...
the practical things you engage with.
Yeah, and it's about independence and almost like living in the real world. Montessori, this is when I'm really torn between the two. This is why I think both methods are great and you should kind of combine them if you know enough about them. In Montessori, I did hear it online.
Yeah.
Somebody said... Montessori is like an atheist thing, and Waldorf is like a religious thing.
Really?
Yeah.
What's the comparison there?
Because Montessori, there is no place till after the age of 6 for make-believe.
Yes, I knew about that. So it's very grounded in you shouldn't teach children about fairy tales.
The thing was you could after 6, but you want them to live in realism till that point.
Yeah.
So they can establish facts.
So everything they play with is kind of miniature versions of real world items, you know, like wooden kitchens and all that type of thing. It's about engaging with and mimicking.
Yeah, so they wouldn't have like a unicorn because they'd be like, well, that's not real. You play with a horse.
Yeah.
Whereas Waldorf is very much on the other side of that, even though they're very similar. Waldorf's all about imaginary play, so whimsy, really.
Yeah. Waldorf, I first got introduced to it through Bluey.
Yeah.
And other people may have experienced this even if you don't know the name for it. So Bluey's done a great job of making the whole creative play thing a lot more well known amongst parents. We were watching it and looking at how their school or their nursery, I always get confused what it is teaching Bluey and Bingo about things. And we were saying, this is like a Montessori school, but it doesn't look like a Montessori school. And then we were researching it and realised it's based on a Waldorf style of education, which is that whole, the Calypso the teacher, is a very hands-off, but encouraging them to be super imaginative in how they play.
And there's a big emphasis in Waldorf about storytelling, and that is what we see in Bluey. So yeah, that's how we really found out about Waldorf.
Yeah. There we go. There's our history lesson for today. Thank you, Emma. We've all learned something. Be interesting to know how much people did know about it, if they're interested, whether they might know a lot more than us. Everyone listening might be going, yeah, this is really obvious. Yeah. Or maybe you kind of...
Oh, there's actually more differences you haven't mentioned. I'm like, well, I don't know that much.
I think, like you said, it's really key to say it's not about like sticking to a rigid, you know, I'm going to be a Montessori parent. I'm going to send my kids to this type of nursery or whatever. We mix and match.
Yeah.
We can't claim to do it all. We try and do bits of it and incorporate different elements. Shall we go from kind of birth onwards, as we often do, and look at different elements that we've incorporated or maybe didn't incorporate?
Yeah.
As maybe we can probably notice it more looking back now. We might not have known at the time necessarily that we were doing Montessori or... Because I think when we first became parents, we were actually quite keen on the whole wooden toys and everything without knowing why we were keen on it.
I'd heard of Montessori, but like a lot of people, to me, that was wooden toys and playing. It wasn't a concept of learning or anything. And I think it's fine if it is, just for most people, it's a fun way to play. Our family assume baby-led weaning is to do with Montessori.
It's true.
My parents see them as... that's the Montessori way.
I think both our parents even, they struggle to separate out the different styles that, the different teaching mechanisms that we're going for. And to them, it's just all new age stuff that we're into. And
which
it all
is
merges
funnier
into
because
one.
I'm like, a lot of this is from before we were born.
It's really old.
Yeah, really old. Well, not really, really old. It's true, it is pretty old.
1907 is pretty old.
Yeah, it is. What was I going to say? Yes. So with Lily, we knew we liked the wooden toys. We like that aesthetic, if nothing else. I remember I'd seen other parents use open cups, which is quite Montessori because it's mimicking what you have but smaller. So from about... was it 6 months or was it slightly younger? She had her own little...
glass cup.
Yeah, glass cup.
And we went into this a little bit in our episode on baby-led weaning.
It was like Pyrex stuff, so it was hard to break. But
but I suppose our parents' perspective and maybe other people as well, I don't know, the typical thing is to give toddlers plastic. Toddlers, when they start weaning. Or at any point, really, a lot of toys are plastic. A lot of, the plates and cutlery that you give children are plastic. And Montessori was all around saying, mimicking what we have.
Mimic what you have, yeah.
So she had a glass cup and she had wooden plates and she had metal cutlery.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what else we did. Most of our toys were wooden. But
I think even Lily turned 6 months around the time we'd got to her first Christmas.
Yeah.
And so at that point, we had the challenge of people giving gifts and things for Christmas. And I think people had already worked out that we were asking for wooden type stuff and not a load of plastic and flashing lights.
Yeah. And also, if people have heard our Christmas episode, my family were all quite honest and blunt with each other. So we almost said to each other, these are things I want, these are things we don't want. So we didn't really have the problem of having to say, please don't get us plastic, because we'd already gone, I would like wooden things.
One thing we didn't do, though, I suppose, again, at that point, we weren't super into what is Montessori. We started reading with Lily really early, as they kind of recommend to do. And so we had loads of books by the time she was 6 months, as we do now. We've got books coming out our ears everywhere. The house is full of books.
Yeah.
And most of those were kind of imaginary stories and fairy tales and things. So that's very not Montessori.
Yes, yeah. I think in hindsight, we're much more of a Waldorf family, really.
Yeah, I would say so.
I didn't know that existed at the time.
Yeah.
So we were like Montessori plus more imagination.
Yeah, we like the imagination.
We do, yeah.
That really amuses me now to think that they're kind of the similarities of how they're compared to like atheists and Christians.
I think
lean towards the Christian one.
That is controversial, though. That's just how I saw someone describing it, and it amused me.
Yeah, it amuses me too.
I think we would if we had a bigger house. A lot of Montessori does floor beds. We didn't do that.
There's a load of stuff. This is a great topic that you've hit on there. The stuff we'd like to do.
Oh yeah,
man.
If we had money, it'd be dangerous.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, isn't it? That a lot of the Montessori stuff now, because it's kind of very in fashion, and popular, it's really expensive getting wooden stuff. And I get, plastic stuff's pretty cheap to make. Yeah. Whereas high quality wooden furniture, of course, it's going to cost
more money. Yeah.
But yeah, there's so many things we'd love to do if we had the space and the money.
But that's why I think people shouldn't feel guilty, because I've seen a lot of things where like, well, you can do Montessori without all the stuff. The problem is you see people with all the stuff and you go, ooh, doesn't that look nice?
Yeah. Again, this is partially what draws me to Waldorf. Is it Waldorf or Waldorf?
I always call it Waldorf.
Waldorf.
Because that's how it's spelled.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. I'm just bad at pronunciation. Yeah, I think I'm drawn to that because of the way it doesn't feel like it revolves around needing a lot of stuff. It is more about
I would say you could
imagination.
Also go down that rabbit hole that you can get a lot of stuff.
Well, you can, can't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. This links in so much with one of our previous episodes,
Yeah.
which was around consumerism. And we said during that episode that this is almost a two-part conversation.
Yeah.
And this is almost the follow-up conversation to that.
Yeah.
In that it does feel like in many of these instances that businesses and companies are exploiting parents and the way they want to do good things for their children. And Montessori and Waldorf are things that are about helping
at
your
their
children.
core, it's meant to be simple things and simple that can help.
And yet they're just, pumping out loads of stuff that you can buy, and they're trying to push you to buy it and go, isn't this great? Buy all this wooden stuff. It's just so frustrating.
But it's true, I'd buy it if I had a lot of money.
Yeah.
Whew.
But you make a good point, because in our consumerism episode, we kind of aired a lot of our frustrations. And this episode hopefully revolves a little bit more around how can we actually do some of this stuff without spending money, without things. You don't need it to enable your child to thrive.
A big part I've taken from both these things is those play trays.
Oh, yeah.
People know what they are?
Sensory trays.
Sensory trays. Excellent. That is the word I was looking for.
I've got you. That's what I'm here for.
So we started out doing a load of them, didn't we, for Lily? Once she hit was she 6 months?
Yeah, I'd say
Or a
maybe
year.
7 to 8 months onwards, we started to really push them.
And at this point, I don't think we had a sensory tray to begin with. So we literally had a baking tray.
Yeah.
Put coloured rice in it.
Yeah.
Which you just colour with vinegar and you chuck rice in and a food colouring and you mix it up. I need to do this again. Has been a while. And I just do like, today is a blue theme. So I'd put blue toys in it and blue rice, and she had a little scoop to scoop things with.
I think a lot of parents, if you've got children who are in nursery currently, or if you've been to some toddler groups or baby sensory classes recently, or you've got children that are under 5 at the moment, I think you'll be familiar with the whole sensory kind of thing, because again it's quite popular. There's a big push around it. A lot of places are implementing a lot more sensory activities. One of the things I was thinking I'd bring up was around the soft play centres.
Oh yeah.
Where a lot of them now, our one here in Harrogate has a baby sensory room.
It
so there's
does.
sensory stuff in it. But not only that, it has a creative play village.
It does, yeah.
So a very kind of Montessori and Waldorf style of...
Yeah, you can go and do your grocery shop or go to the vet.
Because it's kind of Montessori in that it's wooden little buildings and it's very grounded in reality. You're mimicking what people do, what your parents would do. You're pretending to be a fireman or go to the vets or,
Yeah.
But equally, it's full of imagination and pretend, and that's very Waldorf.
I think yes, but I think Montessori, it's not imagination. It has to be about the real world.
Yeah, I see. I'm with you.
You're right in that Waldorf, it would be like that, but they could be like, but a fairy's going to the shop.
Yeah.
Like it's just that slight difference in emphasis of where the imagination is at.
Maybe if there's like a dress-up box that has lots of fantasy elements in, that would be a bit more Waldorf.
Yeah. And then I was going to say, what steps did we do after that? Because I'll be honest, this is, I think, what's else, but you can spend a long time making beautiful trays and your child might not look at it.
Yeah.
And if you're following the Montessori way, you're not meant to pressurize them.
Yeah.
You're meant to let them explore it if they want to, or ignore it.
It's a bit like baby-led weaning, isn't it? It's like baby-led play. It's like you
yeah.
follow your child's instinct and help them learn about the world through the way they want to engage with it.
That's it. That's exactly it. You've said that beautifully.
Oh, why, thank you, darling.
I think that's why I'm a big supporter of this.
Yeah.
I really like the idea that the child is interested in something and therefore you show an interest in what that is, rather than going, well, we're going to do this activity, and which, as painful as it is when I've spent a lot of time and energy making this beautiful thing that you're not going to look at.
We had someone actually comment when we told some of our regular listeners in our community chat on Facebook that we were recording this episode. Someone mentioned about that frustration that you lay out all these designed activities for them to engage with, and then the kids come in and just completely ignore it and pull different toys off the shelf.
And you just have to suck it up and go, okay, that's fine.
I'm interrupting myself here, or I'm interrupting Emma maybe. I'm interrupting ourselves here to remind you to click the buttons and do all the things to help the podcast grow and to, all the good stuff. It's good to ask you to do it in case you forget. We'd love you to share this episode or the podcast in general with friends and family or whoever. If you've got someone who you think would be interested in Montessori and Waldorf, share it with them. Tell them, listen to this, it's great. Or tell them, it's rubbish, don't listen to it. One thing I've not said before, remember to turn on notifications so that you can be reminded with a little bell that we've got a new episode out. New episodes usually drop each Thursday for us, but you can engage whenever you like.
Whenever you like.
We're a very topic-based podcast, so you can go back and listen to any episode at any time, whenever you have a spare moment. It's also a good time to remind everyone that we are something. What are we?
I don't know what you want to say.
Why do we do this podcast, Emma?
Because we're nice people.
Yeah. You're going to say because we've had some money from the church.
That's not the only reason we've done it, though. That seems very conceited.
As always, we're very grateful to the Kairos movement and the Methodist Church for enabling us to be able to do this podcast.
Yeah.
And we don't like to kind of hammer it over your head. So you can pick up on it, throughout the episodes that we're Christians and go to church and stuff. But, that's just part of who we are. And, we like to share a bit of that.
You're free to believe whatever you want to believe.
Yeah, of course. We're not here to say, you got to be a Christian too. Only Christians are going to listen to this podcast. The Kairos movement in particular, I think, prides itself on being a very liberal and open community. Inclusive community. So there's quite a lot of people in there who are just kind of exploring faith as well. Wouldn't necessarily define themselves as anything, just seeking what spirituality in the world looks like. If that sounds of interest, then maybe there's something there for you. But if not, don't worry. You just enjoy listening to our voices. Finally, just to mention, as I don't think I've mentioned it for a few episodes, go check us out on the socials, the places. You can find us on YouTube and Instagram at don'twakethebaby_podcast. And you can find lots of links and information to everything and resources as well over on our webpage, which you can find the link to in the description, the show notes down below, just in case you're not sick of me saying it by now. It's www.kairosmovement.org.uk/don'twakethebaby.
Well done. I think they're both very nature driven.
Yeah.
And we've automatically always kind of done that. I wouldn't say it's something we've taken from them because we're both big nature lovers anyway.
Yeah, we love the outdoors. I mean, you can probably tell from listening to this that we're both big advocates for these styles of play. We're very passionate about it. I mean, I feel like really we should have someone on who hates them or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be more interesting.
Well, but I would say it's not realistic to, unless you have a lot of money or a lot of time, to say your whole house is going to be in Montessori, your whole house is going to be Waldorf, everything is going to fit into that niche. Because that's not the reality of parenting. Yeah. If I was that way, she would never have anything plastic. But I mean,
and you have to realise
as
parents that you often have to compromise and pick your battles. There's things we'd like to do that you can't always manage, and that's okay. You just roll with it and do the best you can. I think we do have to recognise that, as well as cost, which you definitely mentioned, there is also an element of, I suppose, these things being considered quite middle class.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Yeah.
And I don't want it to feel like we're looking down on any parents that have lots of
do them.
plastic toys and battery-powered flashing lights, and that's fine. That's okay.
Yeah.
You know, we're just big fans of this style as well.
Yeah. I'd also say Lily equally loves flashing toys.
Yeah. And I suppose maybe the question next is how, you know, in our consumerism episode, we expressed frustration that a lot of this stuff is pushed on us. And that's how we kind of end up sometimes with a lot of these things. But actually, there is a bit of hope that given the choice, I know Lily does like a lot of flashing lights and plastic toys, but she really enjoys and seems to just naturally gravitate towards a lot of these styles, which I suppose is the idea.
Yeah. I think it is. And I think in many ways, she's a very Montessori child. In that a lot of things I've read about them being very independent. And I was like, she is a very independent child. Like, she's clingy with me, but she's very independent in that she knows what she wants. And she's very good when you go out for a meal. She's happy to sit and play by herself and choose what she's going to do.
This is something I thought I'd mention, which I don't know if it particularly fits with these styles of play or not, but I feel very proud in hindsight that as a parent, I spent quite a lot of her formative kind of 6 months to a year period when I was in charge of childcare on various days. I would often like leave her to play by herself. And you would often come in and be like, why haven't you created a sensory tray? Why haven't you put any effort into making a Montessori style thing? I'm like, well, I've just left her to play with the TV remote, or, you know, she's just sat on the floor, you know, doing something, and I'm doing some work on my phone or something. And actually, I think having a little bit of that in the mix has been, looking back, really helpful, because it's enabled her to have that independent play and learn to engage with stuff by herself and have quite a lot of imagination.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So points to Baba. Points to Baba.
Points for neglect.
I'm claiming it.
Yeah. I think we do have this pressure that you feel like, especially I felt like I needed to almost do something educational all the time. To be like, oh, like I need to because it's good for her brain. So I need to do all these things all the time just to, you know, feel like I'm achieving something.
I wonder if part of that is we do have a lot of family and friends and, you know, even some of our parent friends who listen to this podcast. We've got quite a few teachers and people who work with children and people who run toddler groups. And there's a lot of influence through all those people who do put a lot of effort into doing a lot of this stuff in the right way. And you pick up on some of that and you go, wow, that's a great idea. We should be doing more of that.
Yeah, let's do that. And I think social media is a huge part of it, in that I used to watch a lot of Montessori Instagrammers and channels, and they seem to do a new activity not even every day, every other hour. And it does make you feel like you've got a lot of pressure to just provide so many activities for them to choose from. When I think you're right, part of both of these learning methods is letting the child kind of decide what they're going to do almost on a whim sometimes, to be like, I've set out some things, but if you want to do something different.
So this feels like it leads kind of naturally into, as children get older, then, as you've already mentioned, this style wasn't really intended for babies and young toddlers. And what we've talked about so far is how we've implemented some of it with Lily when she was a baby and a toddler. But then there's the stage where they start interacting with kind of the education system and childcare and all that. It's fascinating that a lot of nurseries these days they're styled in a way that has this creative play, even though I think a lot of them don't say we're Montessori or Waldorf. Like our nursery is definitely a Montessori style.
It is definitely, nursery. And it's why we liked it when we initially saw it and saw all the activities they do with them.
And it's going back to your outdoor thing. Ours is very, very big on outdoors and nature. Yeah.
Which, once again, we were really big fans of. But I don't think... Because we originally watched Bluey, we were like, wow. And I think that's because it was a school setting. But I think most of our nurseries are becoming those kinds of settings. And that's really good, in that they're really promoting doing outdoor things and exploring things, not just, you know, being active, like touching the slimy stuff and seeing what it is. And actually interacting with much more things rather than just being like, we're going to read about it. They're like,
Yeah,
well, let's go
yeah.
see what that looks like.
Yeah. We'll talk a bit more in a second about that kind of education system as we progress through it. But it feels like a good point to interject there around how things have changed, because often on our podcast, we quite like to look back and think about how did things look when we were growing up. And I think this is a fascinating one, really, because it has changed a lot.
A lot.
And it hasn't. So
I know it's odd, isn't it?
it's a weird one where definitely in the past, and someone was telling us about this who's kind of been involved over the past 10, 20 years, maybe, kind of more short term.
Yeah.
It's really changed, and there's a lot more places that offer and have engaged with these styles of creative play. But then you go back to when we were children, there was a lot more plastic, if you like.
Yeah.
But in the like early 90s and things, you didn't get like a lot of the battery powered flashing light things. It was still a lot of ways you engaged imaginatively.
Yeah.
So I remember being at nursery, and even at home my parents would buy a lot of this stuff. You know, I was a big fan of playing with Lego and with Playmobil, and they were plastic, but I had like these big pirate ships and castles that had little figures, and I would spend hours like imagining like stories and playing with them and shooting the little trebuchets and the cannons on the pirate ship, and that's very like in keeping. And it was plastic, but it's weird how we're kind of coming a full circle.
And I think also, I remember at my nursery, we did do a lot of art and like painting. And I actually think that that's something that maybe has been continuous. I think art has a lot of the time been seen as a very good thing for young children. But like you, we didn't have, toys that fought each other, but we had a lot of those animals, plastic animals. And we'd make Lego houses for the animals, and they'd live in a street, and that it really reminded me of like a lot of things Lily plays with now. Yeah. Just hers is often made of wood.
Yeah. So it's just made me think, you saying that, how one of the major differences between when we were young and now is particularly around like electronics.
Yes.
And how a lot of that type of stuff has developed and is a big draw for kids. And now there's almost this big push away from that.
Well, I read a thing yesterday that really annoyed me about millennial parents and how that we're just parenting with iPads and tablets. And they were really criticising it. And I wanted to be like, not in a mean way. If our parents had tablets, we would have had them.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that it's millennials are doing a bad job, they're just giving their children tablets. I'm like, it's the fact we have tablets available.
Yeah.
As in, I watched a lot of TV, and I don't think in the grand scheme of things it's affected me. As in, I still was very imaginative as a child. I would say, it's 50-50, isn't it? Because what a lot of TV is to me and to somebody else might be very different.
Yeah.
But we were never told, like, they were very liberal, I would say, with most of our television watching. So I often think if tablets had been available, then I think we would have been given them. Lily doesn't have one yet, but it's not something I'm against having.
Well, I just find it interesting because many of you might know if you're long-time listeners, but if you don't, I work in, with the church, but I work in digital. I work with technology. And so I'm very invested in promoting technology in a positive light, and for me I get really frustrated when people blame
in
technology
the same way,
for things.
I work in the video game industry where both people are very into technology, but it frustrated me that they were basically saying millennials are lazy parents because they just give them a tablet.
I saw something actually, might have even been this morning, where a post on social media that was advocating like the complete opposite against that, supporting parents in saying a lot of people point the finger of blame and say, your kids watch too much screens and too much TV, and they were showcasing how like, here's the result of my kid watching too much TV, and they'd been watching so much, the Great British Bake Off.
Oh yeah.
And they'd been learning how to bake, and they'd been really encouraged and they're really enthusiastic. They'd produced some great like pastries. And it was like, and other people in the comments were showcasing how their kids had got into crafting and had done other things because they'd learnt it on YouTube.
It's stuff like that. I think it can be actually something really helpful. And it's a complete tangent, but it really annoyed me that they said.
Well, I think it's a good
lazy.
tangent. It's a good example of how I think technology is just a tool and it can be used positively or negatively.
Yeah.
And I think these styles of learning that are all around mimicking and imagination can be applied to parenting with technology.
That's true.
Montessori and Waldorf aren't inherently shunning technology and saying you should have no screen
especially
time.
when they were made, there wasn't that level of technology around.
They were made in 1907 and 1912. Of course, they had no concept of how does technology integrate with this.
Yeah.
Shall we shift on and talk about the education system further up the chain? And some of this is not stuff we've experienced
I was going to say,
yet.
we don't really know yet.
No, but when we're talking about this, it feels important to mention because it's something we talk about quite a lot.
We do.
So, for example, the whole like Montessori nursery, we've not sent her to a specific one, but it is in the style. But we've also talked about, should we send Lily to a Montessori primary school?
Yeah, we have talked about that a lot.
And it'd be fascinating to know if we've got any listeners that
have experience
done
of that.
Yeah, or how do they find it? Because as you've heard, we're big fans of this style of learning, and so it frustrates us then that a lot of the typical education system is just so counter to it. Like, we look at what happens in Bluey and go, that looks amazing.
Great, yeah.
Like, I wish Lily could experience that.
Especially in a primary school setting, because like I said, I think nursery's catered for really well.
Yeah.
And I don't know, because it probably depends on your primary school how strict they are with curriculums and what you have to learn. But I would love the idea that she could go off and learn in a very playful way, not being like you have to sit here and learn the letters. Like, there's a way you can like draw letters in sand and you know, almost do it as a game rather than having to sit and think, oh, I have to learn this because there's going to be a test, which was a big thing. In most Montessori schools, there is no testing unless it is required by the state.
That sounds perfect. I really don't know why we test
Whereas,
anyone.
like, I get you need to know they know it, but people learn things in such different ways and they have such different styles.
Yeah.
And I think especially at a young age, I didn't find tests helpful. I just found them stressful.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And you can't tell, we have a big thing against testing too young because I just don't think it's helpful.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of my school life, I spent revising for tests and being worried about tests.
It probably affects us quite a lot that we're both self-sufficient is not the right word. We're very good at independent learning. We're both very self-motivated
We are.
to learn. And so for us, actually, in our childhood, I don't think either of our experiences of school, we would say, like, facilitated our learning very well.
No, I would say socially, it was good.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I disliked school. I think one of my main problems with most of my schooling is that I could have taught myself at home, and I don't think it would have made that big an impact on my education.
I literally
because a lot of it was reading from books.
I literally have the same thing, yeah, where so much of particularly secondary school was just reading out a textbook.
It was. That's what I mean. Primary school was a bit better.
Yeah.
But secondary school, it was you were reading a book, you were writing the answers to the book.
Yeah.
Science, occasionally you got an experiment, but I never found it, oh, I've learned so much from being here.
Yeah.
It was, no, I've learned because I've read it in the book.
I remember in year 6 being so excited and them asking, what are you most looking forward to going to secondary school? And I remember thinking that what I was most excited about was science and that they had labs and that we'd do science experiments and that there'd be so much practical learning. Because for me, and maybe it's because I was a boy and not a girl, the stereotype, I was very much like a hands-on learning person.
Yeah.
I really struggled to learn just by reading. Being dyslexic probably didn't help as well.
Yeah.
But then when I got to secondary school, I found like 80% of our science lessons were just reading a textbook.
Yeah.
And we did do some experiments, but
this one, it's not that I had bad teachers. I had teachers that were very passionate. I think it was the curriculum that was like, well, I have to be ready for this test. Because I also got annoyed. It'd be a beautiful day outside and we'll have to sit in classrooms all day. And I wanted to be like, we're in the north of England. We don't get that much many beautiful days.
Yeah.
And that day, especially secondary school, I was like, I would like to just go in the fields and play a sport or, sit in the sun. Even if we're learning outside, I'd like to just be outside right now, which would completely distract me from anything they were trying to, and anybody else, I think, because most of us were just staring out of the window going, isn't it beautiful out there? And we're not allowed to be out there.
I used to never, like, when we first met, and I lived down south, I never used to quite believe you when you talked about the north. Because I was like, well, yeah, it's sunny in summer, of course. And I never quite understood until I moved up here to the north, first in Cumbria and then across to Yorkshire, and realised that, yeah, it's pretty grey and you rarely see the sun.
It is nice when we do get a good summer, but it's something that you can't go, oh, it's definitely going to be sunny this summer. We're going to have a lovely summer. Yeah. So, I think that's why my annoyance was so much as a child. In that I was like, it's beautiful and you're not letting me out there. You're making me stay imprisoned in this building.
Anyway, we're getting off topic, but I suppose to a certain extent it makes sense because we can't talk of our experience with Lily in this situation because we haven't got there. She's 2.5. Yeah. So we fall back on what we experienced when we were young. But it'd be fascinating to know if you've got older children and they're in primary or secondary school, how you're navigating that, particularly if you're like us and big fans of this creative play style of learning. How do you...
Or have schools changed more than we think they have?
Yeah.
Like, are schools a lot better than they used to be?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying my schools were terrible. I'm just saying I don't think we ever had that creative element involved. And there wasn't any freedom, I would say, in secondary school.
My hope is that we're in the early stages, as we found over the last 10 years, where nurseries and things have really shifted towards this style of sensory stuff and imagination, that actually, as we go forward, that will hopefully keep progressing up through primary school and eventually secondary school. It's my hope.
That's a lovely hope. I think my problem is, I don't want to sound too negative, but because basically the government controls our school systems, I don't know if I don't know if any of the people who will ever get into power will be radical enough to overhaul the school system. I think that's a lovely dream. And I feel like maybe in small steps, a lot of schools could become more like that. But I think until you get rid of a lot of testing that they say has to be done, you're not going to have that kind of freedom. Do we have any parenting stories to share today?
I'll have a look, see if we've got any comments or things that listeners have sent in or commented on social media. Yeah, one of the things that someone commented and mentioned on I think it was last week on one of the episodes or posts we shared, was telling us about a time when a parenting fail, that when they went out, happened to be New Year's Day that this story happened, but they were encouraging their 2.5-year-old to run through puddles in town, and it all was going fine for 10-15 minutes until they hit one puddle with too much gusto, and then there was lots of tears followed by an emergency pair of leggings from next sales rack. So very similar to some of our experiences where a single drop of water on clothing and suddenly it's like, I've got to take this off.
Got to take it off now.
Got to change it.
Yeah.
And they were out and about and therefore had to go and quickly buy a new pair of trousers. Yeah. I can resonate with this story. Yeah. But there we go. Is this story sound familiar to you if you're listening? Let us know. Comment on a post somewhere. Let us know what's going on in your lives, and we'll share it with the wider world so we can all enjoy and relax in the knowledge that
we're all not perfect.
Yeah, and that there's other people going through the same thing out there. Well, thank you everyone for joining us here in the quiet corner of the library bus.
Whoop whoop.
I feel like it's a very 90s thing having a little library bus go round. And
yeah, I don't know if that... I mean, I assume they might do. Who knows?
Did other people have library buses? Maybe because we're a bit of country bumpkins.
We both, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Anyway,
let us know. Did you have a library bus? If you don't know what one is.
I hope you've learnt something about Montessori and Waldorf today.
You might not have done. We were very rambly.
Yeah, we're not experts by any means, and we're not even good at explaining it.
No.
But hopefully it's been enjoyable.
Yeah.
And you share share something of our journey, or even if you don't, let us know. It's good if you've got different experiences. Sleep well, God bless.
And don't wake the baby.
Or the toddler.
Or the toddler.
Go to sleep now.